this book is about the transformation of China from a socialist country towards a market economy, and I look at how the individual subject they make a way to transform themselves. And in this context, it's particularly about China becoming a world factory and the rise of a new working class. And I look at particularly the women workers subjects. Basically, it's about the change from a socialist subject towards a market-oriented subject. And what is a market-oriented subject? That means that people they have no other options except going out to work in a factory. And especially for these young women, they grow up in the countryside, and when the countryside, I mean the collective system, the collective farm was collapsed, so they cannot rely themselves on the land anymore. So they are under pressure to move, and they're under pressure to migrate to work in the city. And at that time, China set up a special economic zone, so it attract a lot of foreign invest company into China. And these foreign invest companies, they need huge number of cheap labor. So this young woman just fit into this global production demand. The field study of this book was done in mid 90s, and so at that moment the working situation was much worse than today, obviously. So when I work in these electronic factories, they produce product for Philips. That's actually this cell phone, but at that time the cell phone is that big. So the working hour is like 12 to 14 hours a day, and there's almost no Saturday, no Sunday, no holiday at all until the end of the year. That means we have a Chinese New Year. So everybody will have 5 days off or 5 days break during the whole year's work. And the living condition is also very tough for the women, because the factories we build dormitories, and the dormitory is collective dormitory. That means that one dormitory room, like this room, we house 20 or more workers together. So these dormitories is for the factories to control the workforce. So that you have 12 hours working on the production lines controlled by the company, but another 12 hours it will be also arranged by the management. So your entire body was actually under the control of the capital. So my book focused a lot on the anxiety, also on the bodily suffering of these young women, and how they how they try to use their body as a weapon to resist this kind of system. In the mid-90s, it's a little bit difficult for them to organize themselves collectively, because they were, I would say that it's in their first generation of work experience of struggles. But move now to 2000, and after 2000, we see a lot more collective actions now. That means that they grow up from the first generation to the second generation, and now they have more work experience, and so and also living together, through this dormitory space, they can also manipulate this space as a kind of collective space. So now they learn how to organize themselves, and sometimes they have some actions. Asking for increase of wage, asking for overtime pay, because it's quite often that you do overtime work but without overtime pay. So now they learn how to fight for their own rights. The student in Hong Kong, and then is the student in China. They learn from this book, and so some of them they start to work in the factories during the summertime when they don't have to go to study in the school, So they all would like to know, I mean, what is happening in those foreign invest company, what kind of working conditions they are. So gradually, the student went there to the factories, and often they work there for about 1 month, and they write up factory reports, and they send these reports to the company. For example, they will send it to Disney company, they will send it to Walmart, they will send it to Foxconn, because recently we did a huge factory investigation on Foxconn. So we send this report to this foreign company in order to create more pressure, in order to ask for corporate social responsibility. So in order to enlarge the space for the workers to organize themselves. Recently, we just complete the project on Foxconn, because in the beginning of this half year, 17 workers commit suicide at the Foxconn factories. And Foxconn is the whole world's biggest electronic manufacturer. They produce all the product to Apple, to Nokia, to Samsung, to HP, to Dell. I mean, whatever name you can say. So Foxconn, like one factory like in China, they can have workers like 100,000 to 350,000 workers. 350,000 workers here in Poland is like a small city, isn't it? But in China, we are in one factories, and all these workers, they house in a dormitory, in a collective dormitory. So you can imagine, I mean, the working condition they have to suffer. So the workers go there to talk to the workers. Some of the students enter into the factories and work there for a month. So we come out reports, we compile reports, and then we release publicly to make it as a campaign in order to create pressures to the company and also to attract more public attention. We also have student volunteer groups working particularly on the construction sites. We set up small workers learning school, so that at the evening time the construction workers can come to the evening schools, and then they have legal and also labor rights lessons class, so workers can come and share their work experience. The construction workers, I would say that is the worst among all the industries in China, except mining industry, because 90% of these workers, they didn't have a labor contract, and they was not really protected by the labor law. Even the labor law assumed to protect all the workers, but because in the construction industries we have a labor subcontract system. A labor subcontract system means that you subcontract the work through many layers, and different layers, they have different boss, and and so at the end, at the bottom, the workers didn't recognize who is their real boss. So whenever they cannot get their pay, whenever they have industrial injuries, accidents, they didn't know who they should ask for compensation, because they don't have a regular and they don't have a formal labor relationship. We don't have a labor relationships in China. It means that you are not covered by the labor protection, by the law. It's very difficult for them to organize, but somehow they organize through the informal networks, because most of these workers, they come from the same hometown. So coming from the same hometown, create a natural base for them to organize themselves. So in time of difficulties, in time of actions, when they didn't get their salary, I mean, they work for the whole years. They never pay once a month. I mean, like the factory workers, we can get paid once a month, but the factory workers get paid until the end of the year or until the completion of the whole construction project. So if they did not get paid, that was very serious. I mean, that means serious to the workers. So at that time, they were organized through their own networks and trying to fight back for their salaries. The change of the economy, both in China and in Poland, are pretty much the same, because it's a kind of coming of global economy, coming of global capital, which change our whole systems. So here we observe a lot of people losing their jobs. But then in the West, pretty much in the Western countries, they were accused of the Chinese workers, because they say that it was the Chinese workers steal away their jobs. But I would like to emphasize it was the global capital steal our work. It's not the workers themselves. But actually, the workers themselves have to unite together in order to fight back, in order to fight against this global capitalism, which is, to me, is not a reasonable system to organize our way of life.